Hi there again. I'm Troy Bronsink, and it's a privilege to take some time with you here in the middle of your Lenten series to keep going through this book by Richard Rohr on the simplicity of letting go. I'd like to remind you of three types of awareness that I'd encourage you to just keep with you in the reading today and the discussion. One is, the first one is your body, the second one is your story, and the third one is the room. Notice with your body where you feel tension. Maybe even just for a second, take a minute and let's notice just what your five senses are taking in, because this is a good way to get to the base of your body. I'm noticing a Bradford pear blowing around in the wind outside of my window here. I'm hearing some wind chimes. What are you hearing? My fingers feel a little cold. A little tension in my back. You also can notice your emotions. Are you overwhelmed? There's so much going on in the world around us. Just in the news, right? The things in Ukraine and the hearings for the Supreme Court Justice nominee. So many things that could have our attention, and we miss the chance to recognize I'm feeling anxious, or maybe you're starting to get a little irritated with the book. This book has a lot of ouches to it. And maybe you're getting a little irritated with me, which is perfectly fine. It's a way that anger shows up to set a boundary. And maybe you've felt some dissent that you haven't said out loud yet. And listening to your body would help with that. So listen to your body. Listen to your story. Listen to the ways that you talk about yourself and the world, and how quickly I move to self-justifying. There's a story I use to justify my history or justify what it is I want. And that's perfectly fine. It's human. It's a way of surviving. But just notice it. Notice, oh, I went to that story. Maybe it's a story about the church. And then last, notice the room. Just look around for a second at the folks that you're sitting with, and recognize they're doing all of this work, and that there's times where the room gets tight, where the room gets really engaged, and just speak out. Any one of you can speak out and go, did you just notice? I noticed everybody leaned in, or I noticed that we're getting kind of hurry up, but like it feels kind of like a word salad. It's not clear right now. I'm noticing this. Just notice. Those can be helpful ways of being present here. These two chapters that we're covering today, chapters 6 and 7 are ones that made me pretty uncomfortable, because in many ways it spoke to the limits of my experience and the consequences of me living in the privilege of being a tall, straight, white male, being a pastor, an ordained minister. Rohr doesn't really pull the punches here. And so maybe you share some of those identity points with me and you noticed it as well. And that sense of not being good. And living into that, not with a callousness, but with space for the grief, without having to rush to justify. A lot of times I use my advantages, or have in the past, to kind of justify where I am. I'm doing the best I can, those sort of things. A lot of times we use church to defend our goodness. And Rohr seems to be speaking to that directly. A lot of the reasons we defend, though, is it's tied to hurt. And hurt is a very personal thing. And so we deploy a personal program to deal with our hurt, and your hurt is real. It is. I've got my hurt, you've got yours. It's real. And so he points in this book to the many ways, or these chapters, to the many ways that we use possessions, that we use religion, that we use self-justification and ideas, the ways that we use individualism, our individual experience, to avoid surrendering to the things we're afraid of. Avoid surrendering to God, but let's be honest, the surrender is more like letting go of what it is we're afraid of. And that can be weighty. It can be hard to let go. So we have to notice it. And you can't really take it head on, right? You can't take the letting go of something head on. We have to let it go for what reason? There's a surrendering. Or what one Christian mystic, Howard Thurman, describes as consent. The soft area of consent. The nerve center of my consent. How do I surrender? Which is starting to lean towards why we're looking at this book about simplicity and letting go during Lent. It really is a Lenten practice to remind ourselves of the surrendering habits in the way of Jesus. So I want to invite you into a practice with me for a little bit about surrender, and then I'll give us a closing question, or it could be your opening question for your group. So for a second, take a few breaths. Maybe you want to lower your gaze or close your eyes. Notice how your hands are. They can kind of sit in your lap. You could fold them. You can lay them on your knees, hold them open. Maybe you want to make your spine a little straighter, and just take a breath in with me. And with this breath, and you can breathe in and out, but with each in-breath, just recognizing God's yes to you in this moment. Infinite love breathing us into existence in this moment. Just breathe that in. Each breath in, almost like CPR, God breathing you into existence. Rohr writes in here somewhere that we're earth with consciousness, and this goes all the way back to the story of Adam being breathed into existence, breath and dirt. And then breathing out your own yes, just noticing your own being here on purpose. Your yes to God's yes. And now I want you to think with me of one emotion or urge that's been kind of rising up that hits you kind of as a burden. It feels like maybe it's guilt, maybe it's anger, irritation, maybe you're overwhelmed. And for somebody, maybe there's not an adverse emotion. Maybe you're just really feeling close and touched and seen. Notice that feeling, whatever that is. And continue breathing. Now breathing in God loving you, hurt and all, anger and all, connection and kindness and all. With each breath, just holding that feeling or that kind of felt urge in the body and noticing God loving you into existence with that feeling. And God isn't hiding God's face from that feeling. That's what we learn at Gethsemane. God does not hide God's face. Even though we might want to sleep it off or hide. Breathing in, God loving you through and through and through. Irritation and all. Anger and all. Sorrow and all. Maybe that's beginning to soften a little bit in your heart, and now from that place, breathe out your yes, which is I love you who loves me. No, even more than that. I love you, God, as one loved, sorrow and all. So, right, you're being breathed in, loved through and through and through and through, sorrow and all. But now you're breathing out, I love you as one who's loved through and through and through, sorrow and all, anger and all, overwhelm and all, joyful connection and all, whatever that is, breathing it in and then breathing it out. Then take one more breath and we'll open our eyes to close. I'm curious if you'd be willing to share with other folks in your group how that experience was for you. Maybe you were just listening and not able to drop into it, and that's the best you can say, is I was listening but couldn't quite get it. Another way to do this would be to share how has individualism or possessions, how has like-mindedness or religion, how have these things helped me hold on to feelings so that I don't surrender myself. But that seems to focus on the wrong thing. What is it like to just notice where you're caught with a feeling, with a story, and to allow God to love you through and through and through and through and through and through. And to consent to that as your own yes and response back to God. So the question is, what have I clung to, or what does it feel like to allow God to love me with all that clinging? Thanks so much, and I'll look forward to being with you next week.